There's got to be a way to make scripts reusable and put them in a workflow context so that when you do the job once and you need to do it over or parts of it over, you have a database to do that. What's important is to identify the proprietary information and hide it or replace it, substitute for it, then submit, then get the answer back, and then put that back together. That's what we're calling an AI interaction firewall. But we're taking the code you've written and we process it with a machine learning technique that finds all the data in that script. So we basically separate things into the command structure of the script. In the software business, there's a whole lot of things that you think you're going to do once. You never do it once. You'll end up doing it 5 times, and you'll end up doing it over the life of the product. So putting this sort of code into a reusable structure was what was the origin of Argon Teal.
So this is an interesting question. So I call this the magic wand question. So let's say you've got a magic wand, Harry Potter style, and then, let's say you get one wish with the magic wand. You could fix one thing in your business overnight, right? One bottleneck, one problem. It could be one constraint, anything really. So what would it be?
It would be sales in general. It would be how to connect your message to the people that need your product and get it in front of the right people. Wall Street Journal published an article saying that the technical debt, which is work that needs to be done and is being postponed, is $1.5 trillion. So people asked, well, if AI or Argon Teal or whatever eats into that 100 million hours, doesn't this go away? No. Companies have so much technical debt, and they might get to where they can address some of it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Solve Fast Labs podcast. So today I've got Steve. Steve's had a very interesting journey. He started out in Motorola and then went on to found a company, NetSolve. I'll obviously let Steve talk about it, which then was bought off by Cisco. Then after that, he started Argon Teal. And then now he is the CEO of Argon Teal. We're going to talk to him about a lot of stuff. Essentially, from what I understand, I've done a brief reading, Steve. So you guys help with the orchestration of systems in the cloud by providing automated ways that's agnostic of what languages the scripts are written themselves. So that's the extent of my understanding. But I'm a techie myself, so I'm wanting to know more. Let's say. Okay. So with that in context, I'll just give a little bit of a brief about myself. So I'm Karthik. So I'm a tech founder myself. I have a company that does performance analysis tools for gaming. Now, as we are basically, I'm very fascinated by the GenAI and the landscape, how it's evolving. I'm more fascinated by what people are doing from. That was perfect timing. Anyway, I'll continue. So I'm a founder myself, and what we are doing at the moment is to look at companies such as yourself, talking to CXOs, trying to understand what their daily operation looks like and whether GenAI has had or is having an impact, or whether there are operational problems that GenAI can solve or can't solve. So essentially, we're trying to understand, coming at it from that angle. I've been fascinated. We use GenAI quite a lot in my other company. And we are trying to, me and my wife both do the podcast, and we're trying to understand, talking to leaders such as yourself and coming up with a list of problems that people are having, operational problems, and whether we can help. So we're just talking to people at the moment. So with that in mind, welcome to the show, Steve. It's really good to have you, and thanks for taking the time today.
So I'll recap a little of that just for continuity. Yeah, I was a fellow at Motorola, eventually left and started a company called NetSolve. NetSolve was a MSP before the MSP term was created. So we did remote network management of people's network. This is pre-cloud, kind of more in the carrier space. It went public, and then it was the first public company that Cisco acquired. Cisco normally acquires little companies that are kind of development stage. This was a service company. It was the first service company that Cisco acquired. And the reason was we were good at managing IP telephony. So we were sort of in the services consulting business at Cisco, and while we were there, we started for a bank in Europe, had like 10,000 users. It was built from scratch and completed. It's a cloud-based thing, so it was a stack. And there was a bug in the stack, which required it to be completely rebuilt. Okay, all the application software was stored away. That wasn't a big deal, but they had generated tons of deployment software, scripts, and that sort of thing. They didn't keep any of it. So in order to do this again, they had to regenerate it from scratch. That's a huge amount of effort. More, half the activity is in scripting. And we kind of looked at that and said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way to make scripts reusable and put them in a workflow context so that when you do the job once and you need to do it over or parts of it over, you have a database to do that. In the software business, there's a whole lot of things that you think you're going to do once. You never do it once. You'll end up doing it 5 times, and you'll end up doing it over the life of the product. So putting this sort of code into a reusable structure was what was the origin of Argon Teal.
So just so I understand a little bit there, Steve, you mentioned a few things. First of all, going back to NetSolve, you said you used the term MSP. Just so people understand, what do you mean by an MSP for somebody who's
managed service provider? It's people doing part of operations remotely as a service. So they call it a managed service provider.
I see.
Very popular term today, but didn't exist back then.
I see. Okay. And the second thing I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned that there was a bug in the stack and you had to completely redo the whole stack. Was it a bug in the hardware that was put together for the system, or was it a bug in the software stack?
It was a bug in the virtualizing layer of the software.
I see.
So like hypervisor stuff.
I see.
But it was a bad enough bug that, you'd like to say that you can rebuild stuff layer by layer. And usually you can. In this case, they literally had to start over from scratch. And they obviously had made no plans for that sort of activity. That was the origin of that was the origin of the idea for ArgonTeal.
I see. Okay. All right. That answers a couple of my questions that we had. I'm curious, you mentioned the fact that NetSolve was already public, right?
Yeah.
Before Cisco acquired, right? So, and I'm assuming that what made you go on, right? You could have retired back then. What made you start ArgonTeal?
I just like doing this stuff. It's a good team of people. They were people I'd worked with before, had a lot of faith in. So 3 of us got tired of Cisco, to be honest, left Cisco and formed ArgonTeal to go try to do this. We thought it was a really important idea. And what we did in the very early days is we outlined how we were going to approach it. It is ML AI based. I think I would say more ML than AI.
Mm-hmm.
And we have patents from 2015 on the approach, which is pretty fundamental.
I see. So just going back to a little bit of how and what you do there. So if I understand correctly, so I'm not much of in my remit, I focus more on desktop software, Android apps that, being able to deal with them. Right. Obviously, we do have a website and then we do have a backend. The backend runs in a cloud server. Right. So for people who are not that familiar with the tech, can you dumb it down a little bit and then talk about the various intricacies that are involved in, let's say, deploying a software in the cloud? Let's say we can take Google Cloud or Amazon or whatever, right? So, and then where does ArgonTeal come into the picture, and how does ArgonTeal solutions help deploy software seamlessly? So if you can spend a little bit of time on that, that'll be super useful, Steve.
Okay, so try to simplify the problem. If you're building something in the cloud, and by the way, the cloud can be public or it can be private because lots of companies run their own clouds, and they end up with things that are hybrid between different pieces of clouds, okay? But you have to build a software stack, and so you're going to start typically with a base operating system and then a hypervisor and then VMs for each of the various kinds of tasks, and then applications for what it is you're trying to do. And then you need to configure those applications. So that's when they say stack, that's kind of the stack from bottom up. Each of those layers is deployed with scripting. There may be standard stuff, which application or workload software that you'd think of as a fixed bundle, but you have to go deploy it. And each system you deploy it on actually may be slightly different. The way you do it on Azure and the way you do it on Amazon are not quite the same. They're the same result, but they're not the same script and they're not the same. Quick example, I forget which way it is, but Azure gives you an IP address. Amazon, you give it an IP address. You end up with an IP address, but the way you get there is different. So what we do is take each of the layers, and you've written code. We're not writing code, and we'll talk about AI writing code in a little while, but we're taking the code you've written and we process it with a machine learning technique that finds all the data in that script. So we basically separate things into the command structure of the script and the data structure of the script, and we templatize all that data. And you can go select which ones sometimes you have data that never changes even though it's data, and other times you have data that changes. So you select that, and then you store that as a library. Each library, and you'll have a library, let's say in this case, for each of those layers I described. Each of those libraries could well be in different languages. Typically a particular layer of the stack uses a particular language. There's a lot of Python, but there's a lot of Bash and PowerShell. And so the way we do it, each library that you build, it can be in a different language. You store those away, and now you drag and drop them into workflows. Back to the example I was using, you might have a routine library that is used to set up an IP address in AWS. You have a slightly different one that you've perfected that you use to set up Azure. So you'll pull into the workflow the ones you need for the task you're doing, and then we export that workflow. You fill in the template, and then we export that workflow as a script that you can go run on those platforms, but it's the whole script. You can run pieces of it, but in other words, it puts all together and deals with all the different languages so that you have one master script that you go run to execute a task. You can go make minor mods to that workflow and export it for a different one. So for instance, if I have 5 VMs on Azure or AWS, and I'm just using a Google's just as good, it doesn't matter, that part's going to be the same, but the way you set up infrastructure on Azure or VM or Amazon is slightly different. So you'll pull in different libraries for those workflows. And so this also facilitates the situation when you want to move something from Azure to Amazon or Amazon to Azure. So that's kind of what we do. We call that product Adept. We have a couple other products that kind of came out of that, but that's the master workflow product. And it exports something that is a regular old script. So you can take it away from the tool, typically go behind a firewall and run it. So you don't need to be connected to the tool to run the resulting script. I'll stop there for a second and let you ask another question. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah. But my follow-up is, in the world of Docker, I might be wrong, okay? So just correct me if I'm just trying to get my bearings right here. So in the world of Docker, you write the program and then you kind of deploy it. So for me as a developer, I put my Docker container and then I deploy the Docker container in a VM somewhere. So what you're saying, from what I can understand, is below that stack.
Well, it's everything up to the Docker container. And then it can also go help you move or configure a Docker container. We use Docker a lot. One of our big examples is Docker on Azure. It's getting that started.
I see.
I'll touch on another one there that's exciting. Kubernetes. Everybody loves Kubernetes. And what they say is what you just kind of said about Docker. once you get it all done, it's fairly easy to use and it solves a lot of problems. Yes, but getting it set up and started is very complex and has an awful lot of steps in it. So you're kind of right. It's underneath the container level, although there are issues at the container level as well.
I see. So that brings me to the next question on your market. So are you saying, so do you guys sell to the people who make the data centers themselves, or do you actually sell to the people who deploy software on the data centers, or both?
All of the above. What's nice about what we do is it's a very horizontal product. So if you're doing digital transformation as a broad term, it applies. That could be DoD, it could be state and local government, it could be enterprise. It fits across all of those.
I see.
And so it's very general purpose. That's part of the agnostic capability. We let you write, when you come to us, you bring the script you've already written and you've decided what language you wanted to use. We're fine with that. With a lot of the other tools, the first step you have to go through is to rewrite the script in the language the tool likes. And it makes adoption by engineers very difficult. But where this goes is basically any place that's doing digital transformation. Then digital transformation sort of means you're changing it, but after you change it, you have to maintain it. And so this keeps all the stuff you built it with in a system that you can that you can reuse or slightly modify. You can produce a new library and stick it into an old workflow, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. And also, I guess it helps the concept of hybrid cloud, right? If I may, a lot of people don't want dependence on one vendor, right?
And so I'll spend a minute on that. So Google, Azure, and AWS, the tools that they have for using their systems are absolutely not cloud agnostic. So you have to learn, and there's like 20 tools to do something on Azure. There's a different 20 tools to do something on AWS and another set for Google. So you get this list of tools that's a full page of stuff in small font. What happens is organizations know Amazon really well, and somebody wants them to move part of it to Azure. My gosh, it's a whole new set of tools. That's still going to be true, but our thing allows you to bring both sets of libraries together so that if you can basically pick and replace to build a Azure to Amazon or Amazon to Azure conversion.
Makes sense.
And then if you're doing, and that's one of the things we did for the Air Force that really excited them there was a period of time when the Air Force was trying to decide whether they were going to do Azure or Amazon or both. They eventually decided to do both, but they had previously been all Amazon. And so they needed a method to get part of an app onto the other platform. We did that such that we could redeploy a couple of applications on hybrid cloud, and you got to specify how you wanted the hybrid to be structured, and we compiled the result to go deploy that. So yeah, if you're doing hybrid cloud, you almost need to move to something like our tool because the cloud specific tools won't get you across the boundaries.
Makes sense. Okay, I'd like to jump quickly back. Okay, there's one thing that I wanted to really talk about before we jumped onto ArgonTeal, but the founder in me, or for other people who are probably listening in, I know this is taking you back to the Motorola days, a fellow at Motorola. What was the moment, Steve, that you decided enough is enough and you starting NetSolve? Can you talk us through that journey, or not a single moment, or what was the journey that led you to start NetSolve in the first place? And if you can share with us some lessons of what did you do really well there that obviously you became IPO and then Cisco acquired, right? What were the few things that you did really well there and that serves you up until this point?
Well, there's a little bit of I eventually left Motorola to do a small semiconductor startup.
I see.
Got sued by Motorola, got my legal education in that process.
I see, okay.
I'm not going to go into details of that, but eventually it resolved, and I was introduced to a guy named Vin Prothro in Dallas, who was a venture capitalist, and we had suspended the semiconductor company, and he said, well, how would you like to come start a company for me? The stuff I had been doing at Motorola was in the communication space. As I mentioned before, we were talking about IP telephony. So what we kind of realized as I was starting a company is the problem, semiconductors were going nuts and solving all sorts of problems, but somebody had to build that gear and somebody had to know how to operate it. And so that's what brought me to, I'm going to found a managed service provider, but the term didn't exist yet, that's going to go help you manage your communication infrastructure so that you don't have to. So that was the fundamental. Vin Prothro was also part of New Enterprise Associates, a really big venture firm on the West Coast, and so they funded it, and we put it together here in Austin, and it took a long time. And we eventually, I don't want to be repetitive, but we eventually evolved to where we were managing IP telephony for Cisco. We were actually managing Cisco's IP telephony internally, and so that made us a pretty interesting acquisition target.
I see.
It went public before that. And so this was Cisco bringing a services operation into Cisco, which was new for them, and acquiring a public company, which was new for them. Pretty exciting stuff. A lot of other people involved. I sometimes was along for the ride. I did make the closing pitch to Cisco to convince them they did want to make the acquisition. So that's pretty exciting.
Nice. Yeah, there's a lot of things there that's going to come up in the shots, I think. Some spicy stuff. All right.
There's going to be some spicy stuff. Whatever your history is, it always takes longer than you think. And it's always a little more complicated than you think.
Yeah. Semiconductor is interesting because my partner works in a big semiconductor firm. Obviously, that's at the forefront of AI. So I'm sure it'll be. I'll mention it to her. I'm sure. Going ahead now, jumping back onto Argon Teal. It's good to get that story. That was really nice. So jumping back onto Argon Teal, Steve. You guys started in 2013, and then you patented the tech in 2015, and then you said you hit a financial wall. What happened between those years, between 2013 and 2019?
Well, we kept working, and we run in parallel a professional services organization. So that business continued and kind of funded, but we had to kind of back off on some of the development for a while until we won New York City Pitch Day with the Air Force. I don't know. It was you go there and pitch for 15 minutes and talk to some generals, and they decide whether or not to fund you. And that's for $150,000. But if you get the $150,000, and I mentioned that the hybrid cloud thing, we showed the Air Force with that money, and that got us a phase 2 SBIR, which gave us the money to put basically we had the guts of the tool, called that the compiler, but we were the only ones that could run it. So so in that sense, it was a professional services. You could hire me to go do something with that code. The Air Force money gave us the money to put all the tools around it so that you could use it and make it into a SaaS product. And that started in 2019 and ran for 2.5 years.
I see. So tell us a little bit more. How did this come about? And what this Air Force pitch day that you were talking about looks like a turning point in Argon Teal's.
Well, they put out project descriptions, like and RFPs. We happened to find one that was just asking for what we had been doing, and so we presented a paper. The paper was selected to be presented. And so New York City, it was a one-day event with 50 guys presenting their things. And we happened to win it. It made sense that we won it because what they were asking for, we really had a solution to. And it was a fairly sophisticated solution. It wasn't putting pieces together. As I say, it was a patented approach. And so that's what got us there. And then we worked with the Air Force for a couple of years.
Makes sense. That sounds like, I read somewhere, I don't know if it was Air Force Day's pitch that, you get funded before you can get a beer or something like that. Was that their pitch?
Before you can get a beer.
Or quicker than, not before. Get funded quicker than you can get a beer.
Yes. So that New York City pitch day, one of its big attractions was if you won, you got the check that day. And in fact, it caused a lot of trouble because they were generating checks for several $1 million out of out of a hotel, and the banks got worried as to what was going on. No, it's the Air Force. It's okay. Yes, it was. The great thing about that is you got about half your money the same day.
Wow. Sounds good, especially coming from. I'm sure you must be working with big companies where it takes over 6 months to sign a agreement, right? An MSA. In my world, just to sign the MSA with a big company is 6 months of back and forth, and
Yes.
before even you've started the project, you've spent a lot of money, you've drained a lot of money in your lawyers, and you might not even get the project, right? So I mean, it's great.
That's
It does
the
that.
nature of the professional services business too. You eventually get an MSA with a provider, but then you have to go through the paperwork for every single deal. And
Yeah,
you end up spending money on marketing and that
lawyers.
sort
Yeah,
of thing before you finally book the order. And you might not book the order, right? That's just
correct.
the nature of the beast.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Moving on, I think you spoke about what Argon Teal does. I'm going to ask you one more time in plain English, okay?
I'll try.
The techie in me kind of understood, but if let's say I'm running IT in a big company, what do I need to know? Where does Argon Teal help for somebody who's
Okay.
in a layman term?
So first of all, we think there's about 100 million hours a year spent doing scripts. And scripts are typically rewritten from scratch every time because it's pretty hard to go read an old script and figure out how to modify it. So you look at what they used last time and I don't know what they're doing there. I'm not quite sure that was okay. I'm just going to start over. What we solve is we give you a way to take that script. You spend a little more time perfecting it, but you put it in our set of tools and it makes it universally reusable. And as I said, you can work in whatever language you're used to. So it's really organization and hierarchy compared to a pure technical tool. If you use our stuff, you can put hierarchy in your operations organization. You have the subject matter experts perfect the libraries, and then you can have a layer 2 engineer use them. And that's generally, that's obviously desirable in operations, but is not typically done. So we're trying to reduce that 100 million hour problem to a more manageable and more consistent, repeatable, and error-free process.
Sounds good. I'm sure that whoever is listening will look up Argon Teal now as a provider, at least if they're having these problems. So thanks for that again, Steve. So moving on to your daily, what you do. So every CEO has either a structured day or has a chaotic day, depending upon what fires you need to put out. Walk me through what your day looks like, Steve. In a typical day, what percentage of time is spent where? It'll be good to know.
So I generally plan my weeks with meetings and phone calls and that sort of stuff, mostly in the mornings. I'm an early riser, so I can start early. That helps you with the various time zones. And of course, if you're talking to Europe or Asia, you're up in the middle of the night, just part of it. But I try to put that stuff in the mornings where possible and leave the afternoons available to do work like slide decks, consulting with the technical people about what they're building and trying to decide what to do next and all that kind of thing. It is very, and then I'm a little bit of a CEO, a CFO type, so I pay a lot of attention to the numbers. I have a CFO and she does a wonderful job, but to some extent I do the forecasting and she does the accounting, if you will.
I see.
So that's kind of that. Those are the things. And then on the professional services side, real problems come up. How do I do this? Can we do this? Are we willing to put $5,000 into this thing, not knowing if there's going to be a result? That's kind of the process.
I see.
And then looking for personnel, keeping personnel happy. We're very virtual. We don't have, we have guys in Tennessee, we have guys in Arizona, we have guys in Wisconsin. So they're all over the place. And there's a little bit of management required for a virtual company so that everybody stays relatively in sync.
So are you mostly virtual or fully virtual then, Steve?
We're completely virtual.
Okay. So you don't have an office at all.
No, my office is in my house.
I see. Okay.
Um, I'll tell a real quick story there. So while we were at Cisco, Cisco has
Mm.
like 20, it's like 30 buildings in Santa Clara. You would go to those buildings and they're all empty because everybody's at home. The communications sector is very virtual and you get used to it. Now, there are issues, but still, people from that background are very used to virtual environments.
Yeah, if you're a communications company, you have to practice, right? What you preach.
Yes, exactly.
You're selling it, right? So
Right.
all right. So my next question is about, you mentioned your daily, and then now every company has some form of a bottleneck, right? So for some companies, it's about generating leads. For some company that I spoke to the last time, they said, no, I want to build what I want to build in 3 years. I want to build it in 3 months. Is it capital? I'm running out. My runway is limited. Could be something else as well, or you might be the legal hassle. Dare not mention that, but let's what your perspective on it is. What is your bottleneck at the moment as ArgonTeal?
So I'll talk about two pieces real quickly on the first one. On the technical side, it's trying to not have to do things over. It's trying to be smart enough as you move forward in development that you only develop stuff once. It's very easy to go all the way through a development cycle and say, no, we should have done it this way. That's what you're trying to avoid. We're good at that. That hasn't been real hard. With a horizontal product like we have, selling it into the marketplace, getting leads and educating the public as to what we do and why it's important has been difficult. We've done a lot of work in media generation, lead generation through medias. And what we're looking to do now is put a small sales team together that follows those leads. And what we're thinking is that won't be a territory sales force. It'll be a vertical sales force. There'll be somebody working on state and local, enterprise, data center, healthcare. All of those are applicable segments, but you have a horizontal message. You have to you have a horizontal product. You have to verticalize the message for each of those sectors and then figure out which one's the low hanging fruit. So that is the major task that we're working on.
I see. So just to go into a little bit, because you mentioned, verticalizing the horizontal product, so to say. What are the vertical sectors that you go after? Do you know already? Even that is something that you're trying to figure out, Steve?
You try to kind of figure out which are the low-hanging fruit. I'll give a couple examples that are different. Okay, so data centers are really all over the place, right? And we talk about power and heat and light and that stuff. But once you get 10,000 servers in a building, someone has to put the software on each one.
Yeah.
And so that's a very typical, you're configuring stacks on processors of various types. And it's very repetitive, but it's not entirely repetitive. Every processor is slightly different. It's got address changes and that sort of stuff, but it's also got probably a different intended purpose. So that's kind of the classic application. But now let's talk about healthcare for a second. Hospitals have gear all over the place from 25 different manufacturers, and they're not a bunch of servers. They're kind of test gear. You do blood pressure, you do this, you do that. And all of those have software. And all of that software is changed fairly rapidly or fairly often and has to be maintained. This is applicable in that application too, although it's not the traditional put software in a server.
Mm.
Then maybe the third one would be whether it's government or enterprise. There's a tremendous amount of software that goes into the centralized capability to manage all those laptops. It may be updating applications on endpoints, or it may be maintaining the centralized application that the laptop is using as a terminal. So it's just plain business stuff that I have Active Directory, the Microsoft capability. and it's very cooked, except that it's organized by territory. And one day I got to put it on Azure. The next day I got to put it on AWS. The next day I got to put it on Google. I may put it on a Mac. I may put it in. Well, so it's the same package, but the thing that puts it on that package is different. All of those are, that's kind of a quick look at what digital transformation in the different market segments looks like.
Okay. You kind of covered a little bit of what my next question is, but I'll ask you anyway. So this is an interesting question. So I call this the magic wand question. So let's say you've got a magic wand, Harry Potter style, and then, let's say you get one wish with the magic wand. You could fix one thing in your business overnight, right? One bottleneck, one problem. It could be one constraint, anything really. So what would it be?
It would be sales in general. It would be how to connect your message to the people that need your product and get it in front of the right people. These are big organizations. And, you talk about director and above, you talked about operations director and below. It's amazing how difficult it is to get the right target for what you're doing, even though you know for a fact that they have the problem you solve. But you got to get to people that know that problem.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's if I needed a magic wand, it would be how to solve that.
I see. Interesting. If we have time, we should discuss about that maybe in a follow-up. But let's keen to see if we can. That is sort of the problem that we are handling or we are looking at as well. That's exactly the problem I have with my other startup. So I mean, we should share some thoughts later on, maybe in a follow-up email. But let's keep the podcast moving. My next question is: I know that you guys compete against bigger players like Terraform and Ansible, right?
Yes.
Are they your direct competition? If so, how is it that you're tackling them, or what is your take on the competition? And why is maybe your product better than, let's say, an Ansible or a Terraform product?
Yeah, that's a good place to spend a minute on, because so basically people use Terraform to build infrastructure, and they use or Terraform is good at infrastructure. Ansible is good at application configuration. They're both good tools. They've had huge marketing pushes behind them. However, both of those companies have now been acquired by IBM, so they're only available in pretty big license deals. So you're talking about Fortune 500, and you're talking about major license commitments. So first of all, if you're using those, keep using them. Our tools can be used to pull Ansible and Terraform together. Again, Terraform sort of has its language. Ansible uses JSON a lot. And then there's a bunch of Python handle all of those so that you can pull your Terraform work and your Ansible work and your Python construction work all together into one tool. Over time, we might replace one of those or the other of those, but that's not what we're after. We're giving you a management tool for handling those big apps. And we sell by the seat. So you're not talking about a multi-million-dollar license commitment to get started. We'll do licensing if you want, but you can use our stuff for a team of 10, and it will help you organize that team of 10, and you're not making a multi-year, multi-million-dollar commitment to do that.
I think you've laid out Argon Teal's differentiation clearly there. So moving on to a topic that you already highlighted that you wanted to talk about. So I've seen you posting about LLMs, I guess, on hallucinations. You seem to be quite passionate about it. I've seen, hallucinations is, I learned to live with hallucinations because I see the bright side of it, but you probably can't see the bright side when you're deploying software at scale and in mission critical systems like what you're doing. So how do you think about when there was this GenAI moment that happened in November, I think it's 3 years ago now, right? Literally 3 years ago when ChatGPT launched, and it kind of changed the whole world and whatnot, right? So how are you thinking about GenAI for Argon Teal? Is it something that is helping, or is it like actually a nuisance for you?
Well, there's two sides of that. We use those sorts of tools in our Adept product, which is the one I've mainly been talking about. So that's the platform. It's based on graph databases, and remember I talked about separating the command language from the variables. That's an AI-based solution. You can't get there without, You can't get to relational databases, and you can't get there without very sophisticated software that's going to go look at a code in any language and separate it into its command structure and its variable structure. But in the marketplace, kind of the other side, that's how it affects our development. We are using those kind of tools, and could spend it forever on that, but it's not interesting. The users out there are now playing with writing code using AI. It works to an extent, but one, you're likely to get back a piece of code that looks beautiful but doesn't work. Now you're back to, oh my God, this is going to be hard to debug. So you may have gone from spending 90% of your time writing code and 10% debugging it to the opposite. It's 10% to get the code, but now 90% debugging, and then you don't really save time. Let's assume over time that will get better. But in our case, we are talking about submitting scripts to generative AI. And again, you need to think about every time you do that, you're risking losing some intellectual property. So we're also working on something called an AI interaction firewall that uses the parsing capability. I usually try to avoid that word, but use the thing that separates the data from the command structure. That data is where the proprietary information is. So if you can take the capability of Adept and use it to separate the commands from the data, and then substitute and submit to an LLM, get an answer back, and then put the real data back in, you've built an AI interaction firewall. Think about this for a minute. Encryption doesn't work in this situation. If I encrypt my question, either the LLM can't decrypt it and you don't get an answer, or it can decrypt it and there was no point in doing it in the first place. So those sorts of things don't work in the LLM world. What's important is to identify the proprietary information and hide it or replace it, substitute for it, then submit, then get the answer back, and then put that back together. That's what we're calling an AI interaction firewall. It's firewall in quotes, but it sits in that function. So it's between the enterprise and the public AI capability, which we typically talk about LLMs.
I see. Okay. I won't pretend that I understood everything of what you said there, but it's something that we should, if it's something that is there a description on ArgonTeal's website, I should add it to the YouTube links below, especially on I forget the term also that you called. What was the term?
AI interaction firewall.
AI interaction firewall. That's the one. Yeah.
Let's go back to that's a new product that we're working on.
Okay.
And but it uses the patents, so it should be fairly interesting. And tie that to the sales issue for a minute. That's a C-suite issue.
Yeah.
Some of the coding issues don't make it up to the C-suite.
Correct.
Okay.
IP does.
But protecting IP does, and so that's a C-suite issue. So that part of the point is to help the sales process.
So can you tell me a little bit more? That is piquing my interest because you said it's back to the sales and it's a bottleneck. So let's talk about it a little bit more. So can you describe again what the AI intellectual parsing is? So the new product?
Okay.
The
product or or how you want to know
the capability, what it does,
okay.
right? With the key problem it solves.
Remember, our area here is dealing with code, so it's not dealing with English language; it's dealing with Python stuff. Okay,
correct.
So you submit a Python script to ChatGPT and ask it to clean up the syntax. If you're not careful, you just gave away IP addresses. Let's say you have a credentials file.
Correct.
And you submit it just to clean it up.
Yeah.
There's proprietary information in that script.
Mm.
We're going to go find that proprietary information, substitute it away.
I see.
Think about it for a minute. A list of commands cannot be proprietary. Esoterically, it might, but in general, a list of commands is using a language.
Correct.
It's not proprietary. So I can get help with the command structure and make sure I don't expose intellectual property in so doing.
I see. So what you're saying is actually applicable to anything, right? So any software that goes across, it's not just scripts. right? So if I were to, let's say, connect my GitHub database, not GitHub, my GitHub code base to Cloud Code or to Codex, right? If I were to do that, God knows, right? So, and you might have a env file somewhere where it contains all your secrets. And not only that, and if you're a junior, if you've had an intern working on your code base, it might be there everywhere in your code. Right. So it's not just scripts, I'm guessing, right? It's just your entire code bases almost go through that layer before they get to ChatGPT, right?
Yes. And that way you can still go to ChatGPT, but you have some confidence that you're not going to expose stuff in the process.
Correct. Makes
And
sense.
So
Yeah.
then, and by the way, your engineers are going to do that whether you suggest it or not. They're using ChatGPT or those sorts of sources.
Solutions.
So if you can make them just go through this application, it will protect what you're doing.
I see. Out of curiosity, is that something that you can? I know. I use GenAI myself quite a bit, right? So with my coding side, and is that something you can integrate with existing like Cursor or Claude Code, or is your AI intellectual parsing something that can be integrated in the flow of these things like an MCP server or something like that, or is the product something else?
Well, we're working on it as a standalone product, but yeah, you could integrate it. We've gone across the line and used the word parser, which is scary for some people.
Yeah.
It's a parser. It's a block of code that knows how to take, we haven't applied it to English language yet, but one could, I suspect. But at least for any sort of script or programming language, it can go find the data and separate it from the commands. And it's just a function. So you could integrate it with other.
I see.
You'd like to put it in a flow so that the stuff going out of the company goes through that capability as part of the process.
Yeah. The thing that comes to mind is I use Claude Code a lot, and there's this command called skill. Claude has introduced what's called skills. So if you say within your, let's say you have a prompt that says, hey, I want you to sanitize this Python script and remove it, but I want you to use the Argon Teal skill first, right? Then it would know, ChatGPT would know that, what I need to do is look up this, utility somewhere. It will run your software through that, and then it would publish it back to ChatGPT. Anyway, I don't know if I was just thinking about implementation as a CTO myself. While you were talking about it, I was like, maybe cloud skills is an area that you should probably look into if you haven't already.
It makes sense, although you kind of want to do this before ChatGPT gets a hold of it.
Yeah, this happens before, I guess, because the skill would, tell them that, you need to sort of do a pre-process, so to say. You need to do a pre-process before you send the stuff back into the wild, right? Anyway, I think we could go on this for a while, but I have to get going with the other questions I have as well for you.
Well, I wanted to wrap back around to the AI interaction firewall is a new process, and you kind of get where that's going. But back in the adept thing, people are the thing that's out there is people think, oh, that 100 million hours is going to go away because everybody's going to use AI to write their code.
Yeah.
That's not exactly happening yet. But what we do in adept, still, even if you could do that, you can't go out and rewrite every piece of code all over again. That's part of the problem in the current industry. Like I was talking about, you read code, you can't figure out how to fix it, so you write a new one. Even if you're doing that, you need to take the perfected results and put them in a platform that can maintain and make them reusable. And so that's, we kind of, where we're trying to head is we'll use the AI interaction firewall as a lead.
Yeah.
Because it gets you into the C-suite, and then work our way down to the people that do coding and talk about the platform.
Sounds like a great strategy there, Steve. So you kind of answered that question a little bit, but I'll ask you again because relevant question in the topic. So your assessment is that even if GenAI gets good at writing deployment scripts, you're thinking that it's not going to be that good for it to hurt ArgonTeal, right? So my question is, if AI gets really good, does it help ArgonTeal or does it hurt it? Right?
They're almost separate problems. But an enterprise ongoing software operation, let's put it this way, AI kind of is a spot solution for solving a particular problem. The company has to solve a set of problems in context in an ongoing way. And so in a way, we think it could help or hurt or be basically neutral to the Argon Teal story.
I see. Okay. So we're coming to the end of the podcast now. So a couple more questions before we finish off. So you've already built, Steve, a product and not a company, and you've exited. Now, what does success look like for Argon Teal? Are you building to exit again, or this time are you building to keep it for yourself?
No, I think we're building to exit. There is a huge partner community out there that does professional services. Like in the Cisco world, you buy the hardware from Cisco, and then you contract a Cisco partner to install it and configure it. So a very good place for our stuff to go is to those partners that do that work. Then, of course, for each company is an internal capability where they do some of the same work. But we would expect eventually, I think, to be acquired in that existing structure, because basically we are making professional service hours more efficient. And so that's the ultimate home for the business as we go forward.
Makes sense. So follow-up question to that is, what would success, so 5 years from now, let's say, what does the Argon Teal story looks like? And then what is success for you? Let's say 3 years or 5 years down, what would you call a success?
I think you talk about that. Okay, so the whole world is interested in software as a service products that have recurring revenue. That's what Adept is. That can be what the AI interaction firewall is, although there's a stateless version of that. I won't go into that. So, we're looking to build $100 million business and exit from there. And the bulk of that business being recurring revenue on the SaaS product, which can also be licensed and installed locally. That'll come, but not. And then the professional services side is just an augmentation to help people do that.
It sounds like a clear plan for you to get that 100 million. Wishing you the best of luck there, Steve. I know it's, we just have a few bottlenecks to cross, right?
Yeah, just a few.
Yeah. So I'm sure we can get there. So last question, okay? Being a founder myself, and this is something for all the founders who are listening, right? So what was that wilderness period for you, right? I mean, that is from 2013 to 2019, you had your wilderness advice. You said what you did there, that is one, but I want to give all your experiences so far, both from NetSolve and from Argon Teal. And, if you were to give founders a couple of pieces of nuggets, what would they be?
Clearly, picking the idea at the beginning is super important. It can modify over time, but you have to be careful with that because you'll be off running all over the place if you let that go wild. So getting your original concept right is important. And then you just have to be patient. I mean, NetSolve was a pretty successful venture. It took 15 years, right? Talk to the market too. You have an idea, go research it, go ask people about it, collect data and refine it as you go. I think those would be the
two things.
There's no magic bullet, at least for most things. I mean, you hear the story about they introduced this 2-hour piece of software and it went viral and everybody's using it. Okay, that happens. Don't plan on that.
Yeah. I know. That's like, again, another favorite quote that I use because I'm from the gaming world. Well, my company, my other company is from the gaming world. There's a quote that says for every 100 angry birds, there's 99 dead birds, right? So that's what happens, right? So you have to keep pushing with your idea. You have to, like what you said, validate whether there's a problem, not be stuck in a founder's bias, which I think a lot of first-time founders get stuck in. This idea is cool, let me start working on it, right? Without, like what you said, going into searching, talking to the market. Is there a actual need for this, right? So
yes, is there a need?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think as it's emerging now, is there a need, and how do you get to the people that understand the need?
I think that's becoming even more critical now because with the GenAI and What's happening is I read a post somewhere in LinkedIn which kind of captured the essence. It's made software development to some extent easy. Obviously, probably not scripts, but developing an app or developing a website or things like that have gotten a lot more easier. But doesn't mean that business has gotten easier. The business problem has just shifted from the making of the product to, like what you said, finding the right people who'll actually buy and use your product. So the business problems have just shifted from the initial part, which is execution, to actually adoption.
Yeah, I'll give you one last piece to that. The Wall Street Journal published an article. I remember I talked about the 100 million hours a year. Well, the Wall Street Journal published an article saying that the technical debt, which is work that needs to be done and is being postponed, is $1.5 trillion. So people asked, well, if AI or ArgonTeal or whatever eats into that 100 million hours, doesn't this go away? No. Companies have so much technical debt, and they might get to where they can address some of it.
Look, Steve, this has been amazing. Okay, this has been wonderful. I learned a lot about Argon Teal, about what you do, about the deployment, about the problems you solve. So it was fascinating. Okay, so looking forward to what our readers want to are going to comment on. So yeah, and thanks again, Steve, for joining me on the podcast. Yeah,
enjoyed it. It was fun subjects.
All right. Hold on, Steve, 1 second.